Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on the Wired for Growth podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pahl. I'm president and founder at Winona IT, and I have two very special guests with us today, Dr. Drew Flamm and Dr. David Hoffert. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Do you guys mind taking just a quick minute and introducing yourself and a little bit of your background?
Let me go with the Dr. Hoffert here. He's the more experienced one of the two of us.
Sure. Well, I'm a Warsaw kid, born and raised. Actually, fourth generation. My great-grandfather came here right after the Spanish-American War. And parents, grandparents were all graduates of Warsaw Community Schools. Love this community. Love being here to be able to serve. I have 3.5 children. You might say, how is a half? We've been foster parents, adoptive parents, and biological parents. My wife is a professor at the esteemed Grace College in the education department, so we talk a lot of education. I have a dog that was abandoned at one of our elementary schools, so again, that's the newest addition in our family. And
Zuri, right?
What's that? Zuri.
Yeah,
Zuri.
yeah.
Zuri means beautiful in Swahili.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And my oldest son is a student actually at Grace College. My second son is going to be going to Grace College next year. And my third son is a 7th grader at Edgewood Middle School.
Great.
He'll be going to Grace too. It's just a couple years.
Yes,
a couple years out. That's the intent, at least. So I don't have the same history. My family has not been here since the dawn of time, but I came to Warsaw, Winona, like 11 years ago to work at Grace in fundraising, advancement work, and early on actually met Dr. Hoffert, who's been really substantial in my leadership development, and even my title doctor is because of him and getting me into a program at Indiana State. I've now served in the role of president. This is my 3rd year in that role. We love being a part of this community and so thankful. And our kids been involved at Jefferson Elementary, which is literally on our campus,
It
almost,
literally is, yeah.
Almost like a lab school for us. And we're so thankful for that partnership.
Yeah.
And we have a unique thing here in our community that we want to enhance.
That's great. And we're going to cover a broad range of topics today, but I want to get started with the relationship between Grace and Warsaw Community Schools. I'm assuming, you guys are producing a lot of students that make their way to Grace, like you just talked about. Grace graduating a lot of students that make their way back to Warsaw as a teacher or an employee. Just talk a little bit about the relationship between the two organizations.
I was looking at the data yesterday, and Warsaw High School is by far our largest feeder school as far as students at Grace. And so, there is the practical nature of like, we need students, they need teachers. And so we sort of have to, work with each other. But I would say we like to work with each other. Mm-hmm. And there's the benefit of that we see the value that each brings. And while the ties are necessary, they are more because we see alignment, and relationally there is a connection, not just between the two of us, but throughout the district with teachers, with principals, on our campus with professors, with our students who love to be in the schools, even if they're not education majors. They just want to be lunch buddies and go in and hang out with some students at lunch. So there's all those different components that make it an organic relationship, and yet just so effective. And, we would not be the highly rated, one of the best elementary education, secondary education programs in the state of Indiana if it were not for the partnership with Warsaw Schools.
Yeah, that's great.
It goes so deep in so many areas. I mean, I think about this. I'm leaving here to head over to your basketball game.
That's right. We got elementary day today.
It's elementary day today.
The loudest day ever.
The loudest day ever. And it is a blast. But again, these are the type of collaborations that we have. So, it goes on so many different levels. Drew and I get to serve on community committees that are working together as well for the betterment of the entire community. And that's something that I really appreciate out of Grace College is it's not just our campus. Okay, it's not just right there, or it's not just Jefferson Elementary because it's right there next to the campus. Grace College wants to be a great neighbor. I probably say it always wrong because I'm always like, hey, everybody around here is a tiger. They're either a tiger or a lancer, okay?
You can be both.
You can be both. And again, it crosses over because something Drew said, there's a teacher shortage out there. Mm-hmm. you know what? Warsaw Community Schools has not had a teacher shortage because of Grace College. Students come to Grace College from all throughout the United States and globally, and they like this area. They like living here, and we're blessed to be that school system that's right here in the back door. And so our first place that we go and recruit, because they understand our community, they want to live here in the community. They have great community values that are intrinsic both at Grace College and Warsaw Community Schools. And so when we're able to go and hire those individuals, we know that they are going to be incredible teachers, care about the kids, be mission-minded in everything that they do, and just have a world-class education.
That's great. Drew, give me a brief summary. I know there's a very detailed history, but give me a brief summary on the history behind Grace College for our listeners that aren't local or maybe don't know.
Yeah, so we were started in 1937, actually over in Ashland, Ohio, as a seminary. And after a couple years of the school's existence, really, really small, there's a move to Winona Lake, Indiana, because the Free Methodist had their headquarters here, and this was home of Billy Sunday, and just had this Christian ethos about Winona Lake. And the Free Methodist had a library in Mount Memorial Hall, which is now one of our buildings. And they said, hey, we don't really use this library during the school year. So we brought our seminary over here in 1939. That's when our founder, Alva J. McLean, gave us our spiritual vision that we hold to this day, to know Christ and to make him known. And so we were a seminary for about 9 years and said, hey, let's bring a college on board as well. And so in 1948, the college division began. And so for many years, we were like a seminary first and then a college, and over time really built out a robust college. You know, every major you can imagine, 90 plus majors now, and certainly the college now is the more significant part of the campus, though the seminary is still there and thriving. And I would say it was, really during the Dr. Manahan era, which is about 2 presidents ago, where early on in his presidency, they had a consultant come in, do a report, and said, you know what, if you're going to thrive as an institution, the number one thing you've got to do is get connected to your community. And Dr. Manahan took that to heart, and he ensured that he was connected to the orthopedic, to the schools, to our community. And it was during that era where you really you saw the campus and community become one thing and aligned in values and mission and what it looks like going forward. And so now, we hold to those things, Christ-centered and community-focused. And we think that's what makes, coming to Grace a unique proposition for a student.
Oh, that's great. Give us a real brief Warsaw Community Schools background here.
This is our 180th year. Wow. 1844, so we were around before Abraham Lincoln was president of the United States, and started out small rural community. Now we are 8 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, high school, career center, and alternative school. About 7,000 kids altogether here inside of our community. So we're a relatively large-sized school system, 20 by 30 miles. We do not fit as a suburban school, rural school, or urban school. So we're all and we're none all together. And I think we have just a very unique mix. As I said earlier, we're all tigers here. When we look at it, you have to go outside of our boundaries 15 to 20 miles before you find another sizable school system.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, good. Thank you for the background here. Dr. Hoffert, I'll start with you. So your role, surely it's about the present, but it also really is about the future of education. How do you see the responsibilities that you've been given? How do you see, shaping the future of education here in Indiana? What are some ways that you're able to participate in the process of shaping the future? Yeah,
it's a very unique role. And honestly, it wasn't the role that I ever planned to be in. I love being a history teacher. Then I felt like God opened up some doors, and I became a high school and junior high principal. Thought I was going to do that for the rest of my life. And sometimes doors open up that we least expect them to. Yeah. And, along the way inside of it, I remember I was running with one of my buddies one morning, and it was early on a Sunday morning, and he looked over at the high school because we were running next to it. He goes, "That's a huge high school, Dave." And I go, "It is." He goes, "You realize you're responsible for that and a whole lot more here?" I think at that point, I just wanted to breathe into a paper bag. When I look at it, just absolutely blessed to think about the future. And one of the things that we always want to make sure that we're doing is preparing students for their future, not our past. And it's so easy to get caught in the past. We all remember education the way that we went through it. We're 13-year experts at it.
Sure.
And so even when we're talking about renovations, maybe for the high school, one of the comments that we would always get back is, that's the brand new high school. And we're like, it's 35 years old.
Yeah.
So it's trying not to get caught in what we know, understanding what our best practices, and letting our community really guide what the values are of what we're doing inside of the school. So yeah, we're involved in everything from politics to tax structures to best practices in education, recruitment and retention. All of those pieces play a huge factor. I've been very blessed with an incredible school board that has let me shape a team of individuals that care about our community, care about our schools. We all have kids inside of the schools, and we want what is best for every kid the same way that we do for our own kids.
Yeah, and just talk to me real quick about the reporting structure. You both would report to a board. In the state of Indiana, the board is really your boss. I mean, controls your contract with the schools. Is that
They
correct?
are. I am their one employee.
Okay.
They have one employee, and that's the superintendent. And they hire the superintendent to really encompass all the other employees.
Okay.
In Warsaw Community Schools, we're the third largest employer in the county.
Wow.
So we have about 1,200 employees that receive a paycheck from us every 2 weeks. And when we look at it, we do roughly about 1 million miles of bus routes every single year.
Wow.
We're the largest restaurant in the county because of all of our food service that we're providing every single day. And again, we have food banks, clothing banks, nurses. You look at it, each one of these things, we really are the community when they come together.
Yeah. I want to dive right into a really hot topic, which is standardized testing. I'm sure it's one of your favorite topics. Talk to me a little bit about standardized testing. What does the public maybe not understand? I know there's, it seems like there's a 50-50 split here when people believe it's a good way to hold teachers accountable or the school district accountable. I hear a lot of teachers oppose them, and seems like there's plenty of opinion out there that standardized testing is really missing the mark. Judging a student on just a really narrow set of skills when really they might be very gifted or skilled elsewhere. Talk a little bit about it, and also just what are some of the methods that you would prefer we use to really benchmark our schools?
Absolutely. First of all, I am not a fan of standardized tests. I'm not. I am a fan of accountability. I am a fan of data, but I'm not a fan of standardized tests the way that they are currently set up. The reason why is it takes so much instructional time away from our teachers and from our students. There's also a high pressure that goes with it. And the high pressure that I'm worried about is even more on the kids than it is on the adults. When we look at third grade, it is a mandatory retention now if a student does not pass the iRead examination.
Retention meaning you're holding them back a grade, or you're holding them at the grade.
Absolutely. They'll be held back at third grade starting this year.
And there's actually a lot of data to suggest that has impact throughout the kid's life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's hard because, again, we want every student to be able to read. We want them at a proficient reading level, but holding them back, you're absolutely right. The incarceration, the dropout rates, all of those things go along with retention. And I'm worried about especially some of our lower socioeconomic students, some of our students that are going through some different learning disabilities that might not be identified quite yet. What is their long-term impact? So when I look at standardized tests, one of the things that has been the best for us as a school system is sometimes when we create our own formative assessments. And that's where I believe in the strong data. Can we gauge where a student is at? Can our teachers come together? Can all of our third grade teachers come together and create what we call interims, where we're doing checkpoints along the way to make sure that they are on track? And then being able to use our interventionists and being able to use specific skill sets to be able to pull students out and work with them on those skill sets to be able to get them to that place.
How do you do that without subconsciously tailoring that to, and subconscious is an important word there, but subconsciously tailoring that to some of your weaknesses or some of the district's weaknesses?
Yeah, and I think that's where an entire group needs to come together. And I mean, that's where the accountability has to be strong. I have not met a teacher along the way, or a principal, or a superintendent that says, "Oh my gosh, we don't want accountability."
For sure. Yeah.
Because again, we want to make sure that these kids are successful.
Yeah.
These are the next generations of our leaders.
Yeah.
When we're all sitting in the nursing homes, they're going to be the ones
We
making
hope they
the
make money and
decisions.
pay taxes, right?
Exactly.
Well, and you mentioned this already. These are our kids as
Yes.
well. I mean,
Yes.
I'm sure it's very common for teachers to have their own kids come up through their class and their peers' classes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we want them competing on a global market. We want our local industry hiring our best and our brightest to keep them here. So again, we're very competitive. Just as we were joking about before this podcast, I mean, we're all competitive inside of our jobs and our occupations.
Yeah.
We want to be the best. We want to cheer everybody on,
Yeah.
but we want to be the best that's out there. We want Warsaw Community Schools to be the best, and we want that drive. I just worry sometimes when you look at the overall testing calendar that is set up through the state, it is taking a lot of days out of that instructional time.
Can you clarify what you mean by that? Do you mean that teachers they have to shift to basically teach that test? Is that what you mean?
They have to teach that test and then just administering the test.
Okay, sure.
So grade levels that are tested with iLearn, you can expect to lose 2 to 3 weeks of instructional time just giving the test, preparing for the test that they're going through. And again, these are elementary age students. So you're taking your 180 instructional days and you're already taking 15 to 20 of those out of your instructional process.
Yeah, wow. One of the questions I had for you is, and I'll take a minute to give a real brief background of me for some of the listeners. I went to a large public school in a suburb of Philadelphia, and no fault of the schools, my own fault, really kind of fell behind and did not do very well. I was in 9th grade when my dad came home one day and said, "We're moving overseas," and actually moved our family to Switzerland. And I went to an international school. And we've talked about the International Baccalaureate program. And right away, I think I was a day or two in and decided I needed to go back a grade. So when we landed over there, I was in the beginning of 10th grade and I went back to 9th grade. And that do-over was extremely helpful for me personally. Learned a lot, really great experience. Big fan of the IB program overall. Very rigorous, probably too rigorous at scale, but very, very good for an international school setup. One of the things that school did that I really valued is no school operated completely independently.
Yeah.
Just as one example, when we had a really important paper graded, it was actually shipped off to another IB school where it was graded again, and if there was a huge discrepancy, the discrepancy was evaluated. You know, is a student perhaps being singled out or favored? You know, it could go either way. Why in the state of Indiana, at least seemingly from my perspective, it seems like schools operate very independently of each other. They don't really leverage maybe more of a community approach to some of these things. Is that true?
I think in some ways, yes. In some ways, no.
Okay.
Schools have been set up really over the last 10 to 15 years to compete with each other, which does break down collaboration.
Okay.
So again, full transparency, it does do that because schools are competing for ADM, and again, that's how we're funded. So you'll see billboards in other school systems advertising for the school or flyers that come through, and I haven't really liked how that has moved from kind of that regional collaboration. Now, I would say on a whole, our people are very collaborative. Every Friday morning from 8 to 9, I get on a Zoom call with 100 other superintendents.
Wow.
And we talk about all the different issues that are going on, how we can help each other out, what are best practices that are out there. Also in some of our programming, and this is where I believe some of the collaboration, especially at the secondary level, really comes in. Is IB is a great program, AP is a great program, dual credit's a great program. They're all kind of different brands of different success stories and different curriculums that are out there. So we're very AP and dual credit based here in Warsaw Community Schools. So again, the same type of idea happens. Dual credit, it's the college professors that are grading the papers, that are taking a look at it. For AP, they get sent off and they're graded on a 5-point scale. So looking at it and making sure that we're holding up, and those become kind of the national standards that are out there of comparison. So a lot of times you can gauge where your students are at by AP success.
Sure.
How are our kids doing against kids in Philadelphia or in Zurich?
Sure.
I actually had the privilege of going over to Switzerland last year and spending some time inside of their education system.
Nice.
Working with some of their cantons. And I received some new terminology when I was over there. I'm like, okay, what's a canton? What does that look like? And some of their internship programs that they have. And there's always pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
There are traditions that are set up. High schools inside the United States are very competitive with each other, extracurriculars.
Sure.
When I was over in Switzerland, they were very competitive with each other on internships.
Yeah.
And maybe not so competitive on some of the extracurriculars, co-curriculars, and clubs that were out there.
Sure.
And I think there are things to gain from both of those systems as you bring them together and you take a look at them. But collaboration is definitely key. One thing that we know is not all of our students are going to stay here in Warsaw. And so as we prepare them, we need to make sure that they're prepared on a local level, regional level, state level, national level, and even global level.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think when I alluded to there seems to be a little bit of a siloed approach, I think what I was really getting to was that competitiveness that you mentioned. And you talked about competing on extracurriculars. Question for both of you here is, I think it is unique to the United States that we really mix sports and education, and it's quite messy. And I think I've been looking at college, football, and I don't recall what it's called now, but they can essentially get endorsements and
NIL.
Yeah. And that
It's probably coming to the high school level at some point.
It is.
Yeah, that situation seems really messy. But Drew, let's start off with you. Just what do you view as the role of sports at Grace College? Is it recruitment? Is it just to provide a slightly different education? Because people certainly learn a ton through participating in sports. What's the role? Where does it get a little messy? Where does it get a little off track?
Well, I think you got to start back at the question of, why is it the way it is? And I think that's just in the fabric of American society.
Yeah.
And so what is valued in society is going to become valued in some of your main outlets of society, AKA education. And so, sports is intricately weaved into the educational system. For us at Grace, about a third, not quite a third of our students participate in some level of athletics. That could be varsity, which is really competitive, or it could be JV, or it could be even just a club sport. And so about a third of our students participate in some way, form, or fashion. And it is competitive, but for us, it goes back to the mission. First and foremost, we tell our students after every championship that they win that, really for us, what this is simply an opportunity, a platform for you to make Christ known. And we hire coaches with that mindset that, our head basketball coach, Scott, more often says, I coach players, I teach basketball. I coach people, I teach basketball. That it's actually about the person.
Sure.
At a school like ours, it's about the person more than it is about wins and losses. And yet we're in a competitive society. And so, yes, wins and losses matter. People pay attention to wins and losses. It gets put in the paper. It puts your college on the map if you're having wins and championships. So there is a measure of care there. Yeah. But we have to remind ourselves, remind our coaches, and our coaches know this, and they remind their players that ultimately it's about the mission and the development of the person. And frankly, some of our most successful grads in life, whether that means professionally or personally, are athletes because they learned discipline, they learned teamwork, they learned skill sets that have carried them into their future. And so there's some good about it for sure, and then there's some dangers that we have to always be thoughtful and mindful of. And in our society, it's important. And so, we want to win, but we want to win for the right reason.
No, that's great.
Hey, Drew, you said it so well. It's woven into the American culture. I wish so much that we paid our teachers what we do professional athletes.
Right.
Because, I look at the heroes that we have in the classroom and doing that. But again, that's not the culture. That's not the norm. I'm a big fan of school-based athletics. Big fan of it because I believe, just like you, it teaches so many life skills. I'll give an example from just this last month and watching the pride factor that it can cause. In our 180 years, and we haven't had football for all 180 years, but we've had it for 100 plus,
Wow.
we have never made it to the state finals.
Yeah.
And this year, our football team went on a run there at the end of the season.
Legendary run.
Knocking off number 1, number 2, number 3. We couldn't get number 4, though, but next year. But I watched our community come together. And I mean, our entire community packed up shop on Thanksgiving weekend and went down to Indianapolis. Flooded Indianapolis. It was a costly endeavor even for a school system.
Yeah.
And I mean, we put out a few phone calls and everybody wanted to be involved. We had over 30 different industries and corporations around the town that said, we want to make sure that every student can go for free. We want to make sure that we're providing them T-shirts, meals. And you watch that community pride come together. And probably my fondest moments of it were watching the young kids that were maybe first, second grade, even some of the preschool kids on their parents' shoulders, watching that.
That's great.
Wearing the orange shirts, dreaming about what it's like to be that kid on the field.
That's great.
And we watch where athletics brings that pride of the community together. It also keeps kids engaged. And that's the positive of it. The negative of it, and I'll be transparent on this, it is hard to make the basketball team in a large school.
Yeah.
Especially in Indiana.
Yeah.
It is very difficult. And again, sometimes that competitive nature can hurt kids or refocus them in other areas. In elementary school, every parent believes that their kid is going to be Michael Jordan. And we have a huge elementary basketball tournament, and every parent is sure that their kid is going to become that next point guard on the Tiger basketball team. And in the end, there's only one point guard, and there's probably 7 or 8 kids out of the entire school system that are truly playing on that varsity team. And that's where that funnel can come very quickly. And that's where we hope that as a school system, we're offering so many different clubs that, while it might not be basketball, is it cross country? Is it our art club? I was just at a scholarship presentation for the Lilly Scholar, and it was one of our art students that has sold over 150 pieces of art professionally already as a senior.
Wow.
I mean, how cool is that to be able to hear it? We have aeronautics classes where the student can learn and get their private pilot's license almost as quickly as they can their driver's license for their car.
That's scary.
It is scary. It is scary. So I'm hoping that there are different outlets, but definitely, and Drew, I am scared about the NIL money coming to the high school level. It's coming down in a transfer portal, and everything else is on the horizon.
Wow.
So again, times are changing, and once again, I have to make sure that I don't get stuck in my ways.
Yeah.
But there are a few things that I am not looking forward to in athletics, because I believe that it's always pure at the high school level. And again, I hope it stays that way.
Our family came to that game on a Saturday night over Thanksgiving weekend. I don't have any kids that play football, no kids in high school. I shouldn't admit this, but we didn't go to a game all year, but we went to that state finals game.
Yes.
Because it was a community thing, and we wanted to just be a part of the community. And you looked at the two sides of the field, and the Warsaw side of the field was much fuller in that state finals game. But my favorite part, though, was when Drew Sullivan, the star quarterback, won the mental attitude award at the end. And I'm like, okay, that's what I want my kids to pay attention to. Because that wasn't about football. That wasn't about having the best stats. That was about his attitude and his achievements and everything that wasn't football, along with his achievements of football.
Sure.
And, that's the example I wanted for my students and my kids. And so, it was fun to be a part of that.
Absolutely.
This reminds me when I was in middle school, our school district made it to state championship basketball game, and it was in Hershey Park. I think there's a stadium, Hershey, Pennsylvania, and we actually won the state championship. It was a big deal, and I've been back to the high school a few times, and that banner is still front and center. What year would that have been? Early 2000s, I want to say, and it was a really big deal for the community. It was talked about forever, and basketball is not quite as big in Pennsylvania as it is in Indiana, but it's still a big deal overall. But that's great. So I do want to talk a little bit about diversity. We have a very diverse district, very diverse community. How are you tailoring things like professional development or even your hiring practices? You have to, you're responsible for instructing a very diverse range of students, whether it's their background or socioeconomic differences. How do you cast that wide of a net? How do you accommodate that wide of an ask?
It is probably one of the biggest challenges that we have. And Warsaw has changed. When I graduated from Warsaw, we were about 15% free and reduced population.
Okay.
And that's determined by the Department of Agriculture, so it's a federal standard. We're now 50% free and reduced population. In our community, we talk about poverty, but we hide it very well. Okay. We hide it in pockets. But that means that one out of every two kids is struggling to make ends meet at home and being able to provide meals on the table. So it's definitely changed the way that we function. I mean, right now we're going through a food drive where we're going to be feeding probably close to 500 families.
Wow.
Over Christmas break.
Locally?
Locally.
Wow.
All school kids.
Yeah.
All school kids. And so they started out at 350. I believe they're going to be up near 500. And I believe they're also going to be able to stock Salvation Army and Combined Community Services, which is huge. Every one of our schools now has a clothing bank inside of it, even a mobile clothing bank that can go to some of our mobile home developments and be involved. We also have about a 25% Hispanic population that is inside of our school system. So our numbers have definitely changed over time, and we have to figure out ways to embrace it. And just as you said, sometimes that goes with our hiring practices. One of the best programs that we put in place here over the last 10 years was our dual language immersion program. Because it's very forward focused. It's providing a skill. Another thing that we learned over in Europe, it is very unusual to be monolingual.
Yeah, very unusual.
Very unusual. Yeah. I mean, I am impressed. When I landed in Switzerland, everybody knew how to communicate with me.
You know, on average in Basel where I lived, to be able to speak English, French, German, I would say throw a fourth in there as well. I mean, it wasn't uncommon.
Yes. Yeah. And our students, most of the time, know one language. I mean, you take another world language in high school, but by then it's too late developmentally.
Sure.
I mean, I think about it. I had 3 years in high school and at least 2 years in college, and I can tell you how to get to the bathroom and maybe order food. Okay?
Yeah.
And so again, you do not want me interpreting for anybody, but to be able to give this gift to our kids and be able to go the other way as well. So we have 2 schools now that, first of all, our teachers that are coming in, we're hiring them from Spain, Portugal, Argentina, Mexico, Puerto Rico. So again, a very international flair that goes along with it because they are native speakers. And for that language of proficiency, they need to be native speakers. But it's working as a two-way program. One, it's helping out our English primary students learn a second language and become fluent really by the time they're in 4th or 5th grade. But 2, it's also helping out our native speakers being able to work as role models and being able to learn the English language. So having that two-way approach, and right now we're up to grade 8 inside of it. Starting next year, we'll be actually at the high school level. The goal is that those students that have gone through the process will AP testing out as a freshman.
Wow. Impressive,
So they will actually be able to, with the partnerships that we're looking at with the universities and colleges, they will have enough credits, college credits to have, and I know you can't go out and get this on its own, but they will have a Spanish minor by the time they graduate from high school. So higher level classes, they will be higher language proficient than their teachers that were not native speakers.
Wow, that's very impressive. One of the things I remember at the international school, there were over 45 mother tongues represented at my school. There's a lag at the beginning of these kids that maybe let's say they spoke German at home, English at the school. There's a lag where they're seemingly a bit behind for a number of years. Then there's this cross-section on the chart where they just skyrocket to the next level. Is that just the brain development and learning both languages and being a little bit perhaps overwhelmed, but then just connecting the dots?
It is. One of the most exciting days is the first day of dual language immersion at the kindergarten level. Because our rule is that you're not allowed to speak English in the dual language immersion class. And so going in there, watching kindergarten kids look at their teacher and be like, I have no idea what they're saying.
Yeah.
I have no idea what they're saying. And it gives you an empathy for our EL students, our English
certainly.
language learners, because think about it, they're going through that every single day when they come into the classroom as well. So being able to see that, and that's one of the data points that we look at. We use some standardized international tests that are gauging them all the way through to judge them of where they're at with their peers on everything from math to English language arts to science. It's gauging them along with their language proficiency as well. And you're absolutely right. We see that skyrocketing.
Yeah.
We haven't seen a huge lag even at the kindergarten and first grade level. So we're watching them catch up very quickly.
Okay.
But we definitely do see that acceleration that takes place of outperforming their peer groups.
That's really fascinating. It's something to be studied a bit more too.
Yeah.
That's great. Drew, I wanted to talk to you a bit today on what seems from an outside perspective to be a difficult thing to balance, which is holding true to the values and principles of the school and the school's history. And in many cases, these are biblical topics. And also, the need for recruiting and bringing in more students every year. And an outside perspective would say, you got to compromise somewhere if you really want to bring the students in. Is that true? Do you have to do that?
No, I don't think you do. There's a book called 1,000 True Fans, and essentially saying like you can make a good living, a good organization, and you certainly are a testament to this at Winona IT of, hey, we've got this number of customers and we serve them really, really well because they need what we have. And at Grace, I talk about we need 500 families every year that say, you know what Grace has is what we need.
Yeah.
I don't need a net of 5 million people.
Sure.
That's not our mission. That's not our calling. I need 500. We believe we offer something that is unique. And part of the uniqueness is that we're steadfastly committed to our vision of knowing Christ and making him known. That means applying biblical values in everything we do, from the classroom to on the court to chapels that we require students to attend 3 times a week. And most people would look at that and go, that's crazy. Well, there's 500 people out there every year that say, that's crazy good. And we want that. And so for us, this uniqueness of staying Christ-centered, staying committed to our history, but also the Word of God, and being embedded in our community. Some would look at that and say, that's an impossibility. We look at that and say, well, that's kind of what Jesus did. He stayed full of truth and full of grace. He didn't run away from where he was located. He embedded himself wherever he was and whoever he was with. And yet he never compromised on what is truth and what is his mission. And so if we believe that we're following after Christ, that we are about knowing Christ and making him known, then we're going to live in, sometimes that can create a tension, but we're going to live in that tension believing that it is exactly what we're called to do. And frankly, at the end of the day, if we go down staying committed to our mission and vision, we go down staying committed to our vision and mission.
If you don't mind sharing, what's something that does come up from time to time? Maybe it's a societal pressure, maybe it's just an idea, but what's something that is tempting, but you guys have stayed away from to stay true to who you are?
You have to, one of the things that we require is that all of our incoming students make a profession of faith. We don't define that. We don't get real specific about it, but they have to say, what Grace College is about, Jesus, we are about as well. And it would be tempting to go, we could cast the net a lot wider and we could bring students in who are okay with the whole Jesus thing, but it's not their thing.
Sure.
And that would be a way for us to maybe get more students.
Yeah.
And we've decided that's not what we're called to. There are other schools who are called to that, and we cheer them on, and that is their mission and their vision. But ours is to disciple students in their path, in their journey to becoming who God has called them to be. And so we are sticking to that. And sometimes that's a hard decision you make because you want to stay true to who you are.
Yeah. Anything come to mind? Obviously, private institution, public institution, radically different there. But in what ways have you tried to stay true to the core values, maybe despite some local pressure or government pressure, or what have you?
Absolutely. Our biggest goal is that every student that walks through our door, we love them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And they're coming from a lot of different backgrounds. And what we talk to our teachers about more than anything else is we just have to love and love well.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it is the student that's coming from the multi-million-dollar family or whether it's a student that's coming from living in a car at night.
Sure.
What are their specific needs and how do we love them? How do we care about them? How do we know each one of their names? How do we make sure that we know something special about them? How do we make sure that they know that we care and that we love them and that we're on this journey along with them?
Yeah, that's great.
Your wife and I were principals for a day at one of the elementaries, Jefferson.
Yeah.
And Jefferson is, in many ways, and you can correct me, but one of the wealthiest schools and one of the poorest at the exact same time.
Yeah.
Pretty bifurcated. And yet we stood there at the beginning of the day with Mr. Wall, the principal, and he knew, and I was convicted. He knew every kid's name. Your wife knew most of the names, but he knew like every kid's name walking through that door and said good morning to them by name. And I was just blown away by that. And there was no, nicer to this kid than that kid. I mean, it was every kid received his full attention and a sweet good morning with their name.
David, I want to talk to you a little bit about another topic I was researching. I think it's a bit of a hot topic. It's the, teacher retention. You talked a little bit about schools competing. I'm sure you compete for teachers to a degree. I know there's a bit of a shortage. How do you handle competing with the open market where there is presumably advancement opportunities, career ladders, all these, hot topics, and you really need teachers to be teachers and sometimes stay put for years. How are you combating teacher retention issues?
And it's very different than it was a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
When I went into the profession, there would be 200 applications for every job. So I felt incredibly fortunate because there was a history position that would open up only once every probably 15 years at the high school. Now that's not the case. All right. We are going right down to the end. We are very blessed as Warsaw Community Schools. We haven't had some of the issues that others have had inside of it. And our retention rate is higher, definitely than the state average that is there, but it has taken a lot of outside the box thinking. We offer now a free medical clinic for our staff and their families. We offer childcare now for our staff and families. We try to stay as competitive as we can with the salary rate, base salary rate, and just other opportunities that there are for our teachers to stay in there. One of probably the hardest things is there's a generational difference as well too. The average person, I can't remember what the number is, but how many times they change professions in their life.
7 careers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Every 3 years is
every 3
not
years.
unusual, yeah.
So again, sometimes a teacher is there, and we hope that teachers are very mission-minded, and they tend to have a personality that is mission-minded, but at some point when you're raising a family, it does become lucrative to start looking outside, and you start saying, okay, I love doing this, and I love being around kids, and we see this every year. Every year I have teachers that reach out to me, and they're like, okay, I just got offered XYZ by a company outside of there. So there's a couple things that I ask them. Number one, do you like your summers off? Okay, and as a teacher, you don't get a full summer off. Let me, that's kind of a public joke that's out there because a lot of times they're doing summer school and they're doing other things. Same thing with Christmas break and spring break. But again, there definitely is a teacher schedule and there is a rhythm that goes with it. It is high intense during those 180 days. You need some of those other days to be able to back down as a teacher to just rejuvenate yourself and be ready to go. Many times we have people that try the private industry. Some stay in the private industry. Others I've had that have come back just a year or so later and they're like, hey, you know what? I realize that there's a difference between money sometimes and mission.
Sure.
And I mean, it all depends on what career that they were looking at.
Sure.
Our teachers are highly sought after. marketing, PR, training firms, love having them, corporate
IT.
managers, IT, yes, I've lost a few to you, Michael, along the way, because, I mean, they look at it and, you know, there are some of the advancements that public service and public industry, which education is, can't provide in some of those industries. So we really look at it and, you know, there's not one teacher that I've met with that I've been like, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
Instead, it's where are you being led to be at? You know, can you take those skills and can you have that impact that is out there and realize that, you know, if you want to go back into teaching, we're going to welcome you back with open arms. And sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't happen.
What are the biggest factors contributing to the discrepancy between the supply and demand for teachers? Does it come down to this topic that we're talking about largely?
I think compensation is definitely one piece of it. I think there's also a burnout rate that goes with teaching. The average teacher stays in the profession somewhere between 5 and 8 years. If you get past that 8-year mark, they usually stay. But it's kind of, I went into this for a mission. I went into this because I like being around kids. I like coaching. I like the subject that I'm getting into. And then sometimes it becomes when they start getting to that growing a family. And that's a place where sometimes it does become a financial decision inside of it because it is a little different. We can't raise our rates mid-year. We get paid per student that goes into the education fund, and that gets distributed out really between all of our teachers that are in it. So I think there's a lot of factors that go into it. You know, that there were some changes at the state level that changed some of those pieces, and we're starting to get back to some of those original areas. One of those would be advanced education, master's degrees. For about 15 years, the state really, in the way that they structured things, said a master's degree really doesn't matter. And you lose some of that thirst for knowledge and some of that step that is there. And as you were talking about kind of career ladders, the other thing that we try to do as Warsaw Community Schools, professional development is key. We've had a wonderful partnership with the University of Virginia and their Darden School of Business. That's something that we have held really tight to because we said, hey, you know what, we want to advance our craft. And sometimes it's those opportunities that give teachers that extra, wow, you know what, this is a professional opportunity.
Build a little momentum behind them. When I was doing some research on the topic of teacher burnout, something came to mind. I'm hoping you can clarify for us. It seemed like historically there was lower pay for entry-level teachers, and to accommodate that, they would try to get involved in committees, coach sports. They would try to pick up a little bit of the slack that way, but that contributed to some burnout.
Yes.
How is that trending today? Is there a different expectation? Maybe that's no longer an expectation of newer teachers. How's that working? Yeah,
my first year teaching, I got called down to the athletic department, and Mr. Fokerson was there at the time, and he looked at me, he goes, Hoffert, what do you think about being a coach? And I'm like, I ran track, I was an all-state runner, I would love to coach track. Can I be an assistant coach? He goes, no. You can be the head coach. And I'm like, awesome. So here I am, 22 years old, fresh out of college, trying to get classroom management down, teaching history, and all of a sudden, here's 85 kids on the track team.
Sweet.
And I'm like, sweet, this is awesome. This is awesome. And I mean, what a great learning experience. I think we've learned from some of those things. I would say now also, and again, this is one of the struggles that we have, and this goes kind of with the market that is out there as well too. There are lots of different opportunities. Sometimes our younger teachers don't want some of those extra opportunities. And so we've hired a lot more lay coaches, which is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing, and sometimes it gives our teachers a little bit more time and doesn't create some of those expectations of doing things outside of their expertise. But at the same time, sometimes our lay coaches don't understand the educational world quite as closely in it. So I would say that it looks different. The other thing, and each generation has uniqueness that goes along with it, okay? And it's not good, it's not bad. Our young teachers really appreciate time. Time is a form of currency that goes in it. And sometimes when it looks at even the opportunities, my generation tended to have a lot of side hustles during the summer, okay? Whether it was summer school or my wife and I were concession stand managers. that was one of our highlights.
I grew up with parents who were teachers. They always had 3-4 jobs going on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And sometimes our teachers now are like, no, I still want to travel the world during the summer, or I want to use this time to go be involved in a creative craft, not so much to make money, but because it's a hobby of mine. And so I think that looks very different than probably previous generations that were up on roofs doing roofing projects during the summer, or being concession stand managers, or whatever their skill talent was.
Yeah. Drew, you probably deal with retention at your level is probably quite a bit different, but recruitment is still probably a big obstacle. What are you doing to bring in great professors?
Yeah, well, Dr. Hoffert mentions those lay, and I'm one of those. I'm a highly compensated volunteer assistant basketball coach at the elementary level.
There you go. Congratulations. Thank you for your service.
Recruitment is more of a challenge for us than necessarily retention. And I think naturally a professor has done a lot of, soul searching and time and effort to get to that level of knowledge where they're PhD level. And this is what they want to do, is be a professor at a college. And so they come ready to plant themselves. But the challenge for us is on the recruitment side. And there are a couple factors. One is our unique mission that automatically, limits the pool of available professors, because not only do they have to be experts in their field of interest, but they also have to be able to align with our doctrinal and missional values. There also are specific areas that are more challenging than others. For us, we talk about the B's: business, biology, and behavioral sciences. And there's some adjacent to each of those. But finding professors in those realms specifically, because a business professor can make a whole lot more money in industry. A behavioral science professor can make more money as a practicing counselor or psychiatrist. A biology professor can make more money as a doctor than they can teaching future doctors. And so that it takes somebody who has the expertise, but whose mission and goal and value is to build into the next generation. And we have had to be unique in higher education in hiring folks that maybe they still need to earn their PhD, and we're going to help them achieve that. Or you find somebody who's done it for 20 years, and now they're at a stage of life where compensation is not their highest value, a purpose is their highest value, and so they want to come spend the rest of their career doing something that they feel is meaningful for their value system. So we have to be unique in how we think about that, and sometimes you could look at our mission as an inhibitor. It's also a benefit, because there are those, and we've hired a number recently, who it's like they've come out of industry making loads of money, but now they're at a stage where they're like, I really am looking for purpose. And I think that's what we have to sell in education is purpose, is values, is long-term impact. And so when someone has those same values, they're a great fit.
Obviously, we live in a changing world, and I feel like you're both being given responsibility to equip students for an ever-changing world. Let's talk about AI for just a minute. Recently completed my master's degree at Grace, which was a great program. The MBA program was great, very flexible for me as a professional working quite a bit. On the tail end of that was when AI and education sort of came into play here big time. And I think maybe my last few classes, there was a notice that went out to students about not abusing AI to get your work done. On the one hand, I think some of us are going to look at AI tools as the calculator, and it's going to. No one alive today will ever not have access to AI. That's true. But there are the way that we educate and the principles we want to educate and concepts we want students to learn can be impacted negatively if AI is at the fingertips. How are you both balancing this, and what's your institutional takes on AI?
I'll say a couple things for us at the college level. It was interesting to even see over the last couple of years how our 18, 19-year-old incoming students versus our older students who are about to graduate viewed AI. I mean, even within a 3-year span, the generational gap was clear.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that was even just fascinating to watch and see. I know this is true for Dr. Hoffert. This is true for us. We want to provide students a skill set that's going to get them a meaningful life and career. So that is some hard skills. We also want them to have a meaningful life, holistic, which means we want to teach them value systems like honesty and showing up and working hard and being a good community member, reading, writing. Some of those things are not going to go away. And yes, they are likely going to have at minimum, 7 different career fields. That's not jobs, probably 15 plus different jobs, but 7 different career fields, which means whatever they're studying to become at the high school level or the college level is probably not what they're going to do for the rest of their life. And so these soft skills are going to become even more important and meaningful throughout their life. So how do you approach AI then? It's a lot of times with those soft skills, yes, you shouldn't use AI to cheat and write your paper for you.
Sure.
But it might be wonderful to provide you some information and some prompts and to make the paragraph you wrote sound a little bit better. It does that for me on my email. And so, how do we use the tools in a way that reflects our values? And so I think that's, the grid we have to think through. And full transparency, I feel like I'm on the very early end of even learning about the technology and its impact in my industry.
Sure.
Drew said it very well. As we're looking at it, we want to get the other skills in place. We want to be able to use this as a tool inside of the learning. I think about it too, Drew. I tried to see if I could write a better reference letter than AI. And I was sure that I could. I was sure that I could because I always pride myself. I'm like, I write the best reference letters out there. And I wrote a humdinger of a reference letter. And then I'm like, put it in AI, see what ChatGPT will give me. And I'm like, dang, that one's a lot better. I'm like, how did it do this?
Yeah.
So again, there are definitely ways to become more efficient. Michael, it might have actually been a word that you incorporated and shared with me of machine learning. And it's the idea of there are going to be new skill sets that you need. And machine learning is one of those because if you give ChatGPT or any other AI a bad prompt, it's going to give you a bad answer.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
You also need to look at it. One of the letters that I was working on had UVA, University of Virginia. Okay, so for me, that makes sense. It didn't know what I was talking about, so it created something completely different. And so, there are still the editing skills, there are still the understanding skills. It doesn't have the human touch to it and understanding some of the pieces, some of the emotions that go along with it. So it's a long way. And I know it will still be developed farther and farther in the future, but we need to learn how to utilize it. If we hide our students from this, we're not preparing them for a global industry.
Right, for sure.
It's coming whether we like it or not. Some of our teachers that are sure that they can sniff out, when the plagiarism happens, we're probably going to have to get a little bit smarter on some of those things. But again, part of that is just the process of it. I know I was in one meeting where we talked about what does a process look like to be able to get there. And good writing's always been good writing. Yeah. There's a process that goes with it. The first draft that you write, when you wrote your doctorate, Drew, you probably got sent back to you.
Lots of red.
It did for me. I know for there. I was thinking yours was going to be perfect. But again, mine had a lot of red for sure on it. But the same thing is true with our students. As we're learning through any of these processes, we can be able to judge the process, not just the end result that comes from it.
Yeah. What happens today at Warsaw Community Schools if a student submits a very clearly, I'll just say a full-out AI written paper? What happens today?
You know what? It'd really be the same thing as plagiarism.
Sure.
And on our discipline matrix, you'd be sitting down. Now, the hope is that through the process, discipline for discipline's sake doesn't usually work.
Sure.
Discipline with learning that goes with it, sometimes second chances. If it's a first time that a student is doing this, it does have ramifications that go along with it, but we definitely want to use it as a learning tool of why this might not be appropriate. Same thing as copying your neighbor's homework as you were going through it.
Yeah. that discipline matrix, is that provided to you by the state, or is that something that you have tremendous control over?
No, that's something that we create as
Okay.
a local school system. And I mean, as you were talking about even earlier, of staying on the same page.
Yeah.
All of our elementaries are on a discipline matrix that kind of gives you a guide. Now, there's a little bit of gray area that's down at the bottom, the asterisk
Sure.
of let's understand the situation.
Sure,
And
sure.
let's understand the student of what's going on, that it's not just a hammer that comes out. But as we work with students, making sure that we're staying fair and consistent between the 2,200 students that are at the high school.
Sure. No, that's great. Similar answer at Grace. Plagiarism. It's treated as plagiarism
Absolutely.
to just
yeah,
copy
and
paste.
again, it's like the robots are trying to catch the robots, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
so you're using for us, Turnitin, and you're trying to catch what's being written on ChatGPT, and similarly, there's sort of an institutional policy, but then there's a wisdom part of that professors have to utilize as well, and that's a big part of it for us, is just to stay ahead as professors, as administrators, on what's happening and how we can help.
I feel like both of you are entrusted to a really high degree to deal with student well-being as a general topic. And we've talked about changing world, talked about how fast things are evolving. I read articles all the time about some of the damage on tools like TikTok or Snapchat, and even video games. Quite a few of them in the news, and I know students are getting sucked into certain online gameplay that can be detrimental. What do you feel is really your responsibility with student well-being? How are you handling some of these topics in the schools? And where's the line drawn where it's parent responsibility, school responsibility? It seems blurry.
It's a very hard line. And I mean, when you look back to student well-being, you can trace a lot back to 2008. 2008 is when the first iPhones came out.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you see this decline, and you see self-harm, suicidal thought, depression starting to come up in the next generation. I believe that a big factor that is technology, and it might not even be technology itself, it's the lack of sleep that is going on. When a student has a phone and they are sleeping with their phone, they're not sleeping. The few times that we probably all tried that, it doesn't work out very well.
It doesn't work out well for me either.
It's hard. And, it's one of the things, and I mean, this is a generational difference between our generation as parents and our kids. We have a hard time telling our kids to put their phones away. And we aren't good examples of it.
Right.
Because we're looking like these old people when we're going around looking at it, doing this and everything else. These kids have a separate world, and they can be sitting on the couch right next to you. As I say, all the negative things that are going on, there are also less risky behaviors going on. Drug use among kids is not as high as what it used to be. Teen pregnancy is not as high as what it used to be, because the kids are doing a lot of their socialization while they're sitting on the couch right next to you. But so many times we don't know the world that they are in. If I can advocate anything to our parents, it's be involved with your kids. Put parameters around it.
Sure.
My youngest son hates it, and all my kids hated it because I have not given them a cell phone.
I'm living that right now too in our home.
Yes, until they're 8th grade. We always say wait till 8, all right? Because nothing good happens with a cell phone. And I mean, we grew up in a generation without cell phones. We came home, we knew some of those things. It looks different now. I don't think the world is all that different, but again, the expectation sometimes that we have out of it. Probably the hardest part that I see with parents is we do a lot of different education, but it doesn't hit the parent until something happens to their kid.
Sure.
And then they're in my office and they're like, oh, I wish we would have done this earlier. I wish we would have been involved earlier. I wish we knew what was on their phone. I wish we would ask them more questions. And so my big thing is I am definitely not anti-technology. In fact, I love technology.
Yeah.
It's be involved with what your kids are doing on technology, and don't be naive that there isn't that other world that is out there where they have open access to everything.
Yep. No, great answer. How have cell phones and how has this changed the higher education? It's you don't have e-learning days per se, but you I'm sure there's tremendous impact that you've observed in your career.
Well, certainly students do a lot of their work on their phone. They read their textbooks, they submit assignments, they do research on their phone, and the social life, academic work, entertainment, those aren't like separate categories for them. They do all those things at the same time together. That said, if you want to be really encouraged about the next generation, come to our dining hall for dinner. And I saw you there a couple weeks ago, and often my wife and I will look around and we're like, we are so encouraged. No one's got their phone out. There are hundreds of kids in this dining hall sitting next to one another. There is lots of chatter and conversation, and there are so many dangers and things to be fearful about and to be anxious about. But at least for our students, I look around and they're at their tables and they are talking to one another as people and humans. And in our belief system, made in the image of God, that we want to care for one another. And so I see those encouraging times as well.
That's great.
Drew, can I say that that's something unique about Grace College? And I mean, I don't know how much you hang out in other people's cafeterias. Again, as a school system, we have some different rules that go around with it, but other colleges that we visited did not have that same type of spirit that went along with it. It is something that is unique about Grace College. The other thing, and I think you've heard me say this, everybody is wearing Grace gear. And I know there's a price tag that goes with all that Nike gear, but you know what? That's a lot of pride and a lot of community. And I think that's the reason that you don't see the cell phones being predominant inside of what are still those social areas. So again, kudos to you and kudos to Grace College and the culture that you guys have created doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's huge. Last question here, and we'll keep this one really short, but I really wanted to talk about our relationship, Winona IT, and both Grace College and Warsaw Community Schools. We've been very blessed to support both of you for a number of years. I think Grace a bit longer, going back, are we in our 4th year? It feels...
You would know better than I would, but
it's been a while. What's it meant to Grace to do business with Winona IT? How have we impacted... how you look at IT and just anything in general there?
This goes back to where we started this conversation about community. And what I love about our relationship with Winona IT is many, not all, of your employees are grads. A lot of your employees are also our current students.
Yeah.
And so if I've got a problem with my computer, it's likely a student who is studying management information systems or English, who works for you, who is being trained in the workforce, being around professionals who are doing great work at a high level, and then they're coming in and fixing my problems. And I love that integration that we have with the local community. We have seen a high level of service. We've seen a high level of engagement and professionalism. And I think it's made our students better. It's made our campus better to have that integration with a high quality, community-oriented company that has an expertise that we need.
That's great. Yeah, it's been a great relationship. We also really have appreciated not only working with Warsaw Community School, but we're also getting more involved in the co-op program and having high school students take apprenticeship or internships with us, and it's been really valuable as well.
Vendor versus partner is always a conversation that we have. We have lots of vendors. We have very few partners.
Sure.
Partners are the people that you know that you can call up late at night or that you feel comfortable referring to other people.
Yeah.
Winona IT is one of those places. And Michael, I know you didn't invite us on here to get personal kudos or anything else, but your professional and personal leadership resembles our community. I mean, Drew was talking about our community. You know, you are there to support us more than just the technical side. You're there as a parent in the community, as a supporter that is out there, that cares about if our servers go down at night. You know, that's a pride piece for you
for sure.
As well inside of it. And I see that from all of your staff, even the few teachers that I've lost to you. And by the way, you're one of the areas that they haven't come back from. And again, kudos to you because that means that you have an incredible mission-minded culture because you're able to hit not only the work world and professional world, but also the mission and culture that keeps people and wants them to be involved in something bigger than themselves. So we feel very blessed. I know you've come in on a lot of even cybersecurity things. And I definitely see that continuing to grow because, I mean, our servers get attacked more and more through cyber attacks. And we feel very blessed to have you having our back.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. I really appreciate the endorsement, and it's really been a great working relationship with both of you. Thank you so much for making it in today. giving up your precious time, potentially missing other engagements. Really appreciate that very much. And I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and we look forward to some more episodes here in the coming weeks.